The title a good cop, but invites a lingering pause, a quiet suspicion that goodness in the world of the streets of San Francisco is never pure and never simple. And when I revisit the 1972 series with that phrase echoing in my mind, I find myself thinking less about crime solving and more about the emotional geometry between experience and idealism, between a city that glitters with postcard beauty and a city that reveals its fractures through the long hours of patrol. And in that tension, the show constructs one of television's most enduring portraits of mentorship and moral compromise. The central partnership between the veteran detective and his younger counterpart unfolds not as a predictable generational clash, but as a carefully modulated conversation about what it means to carry authority in a place where authority is constantly questioned by shifting social realities. And the series does not rush its characters toward easy conclusions, but instead allows them to inhabit uncertainty in a way that feels unusually patient for a police drama. When I think about the opening scenes that establish the city as both backdrop and character, I am struck by how deliberately the camera lingers on steep streets, weathered storefronts, and neighborhoods that seem caught between old traditions and new anxieties, and that visual texture becomes a silent commentary on the emotional lives of the detectives who move through those spaces, because every case they encounter is filtered through a landscape that feels alive and unpredictable. The older detective carries with him the weight of years spent witnessing the city's transformations, and his sense of justice is tempered by experience that has taught him the limits of idealism, while the younger detective enters each situation with an energy that suggests belief in the possibility of clarity, and their conversations reveal how those perspectives clash and eventually converge. One of the most compelling aspects of the show lies in its willingness to depict policing as a profession defined by ambiguity rather than heroism, and the phrase a good cop but becomes a refrain that captures the uneasy truth that moral integrity can coexist with doubt, with mistakes, and with the recognition that every decision leaves a residue of consequence. I remember watching a sequence in which the detectives interview a witness whose story changes with each retelling, and instead of presenting the scene as a simple exercise in interrogation, the show transforms it into a meditation on memory and fear, and the older detective's patience contrasts with the younger detective's urgency in a way that underscores their different approaches to truth. Because one believes in the slow accumulation of detail, while the other believes in decisive action. That contrast echoes through the entire narrative as each case forces the characters to confront the difference between solving a crime and understanding the people involved in it, and the show's strength lies in its refusal to collapse those two goals into a single outcome. The city itself functions as a labyrinth of perspectives, and the detectives often find themselves navigating not just physical spaces, but emotional landscapes that challenge their assumptions, and I find it fascinating how the series uses everyday encounters to reveal deeper questions about responsibility and empathy. In one memorable sequence, the detectives walk through a crowded street festival while discussing a case that has grown increasingly complicated, and the noise and movement around them serve as a reminder that life continues regardless of the moral dilemmas they face, and that sense of continuity gives the show a grounded realism that feels both comforting and unsettling. The phrase a good cop but becomes a lens through which every character can be examined, because even those who exist on the margins of the story are given moments that reveal their own conflicts and compromises, and the series avoids reducing anyone to a simple role within the narrative. I find myself reflecting on how the show balances procedural structure with character exploration, and how each investigation becomes an opportunity to explore themes of trust, loyalty, and the cost of maintaining order in a society that is constantly evolving. The older detective's calm demeanor often masks a deeper weariness, and there are moments when his silence speaks louder than any dialogue, suggesting that the accumulation of experience has left him with an awareness of how fragile certainty can be, while the younger detective's determination sometimes leads him into situations where his confidence is tested. And those moments of vulnerability create a dynamic that feels authentic and compelling. As the series unfolds, the relationship between the two detectives evolves in subtle ways, and I am particularly drawn to scenes where they share quiet conversations after a case has ended, because those moments reveal the emotional toll of their work and the ways in which they rely on each other for support, even when they disagree. The title A Good Cop but resonates most strongly in those quieter scenes because it captures the tension between aspiration and reality that defines the characters' lives, and it suggests that goodness is not a fixed state, but a continual process of reflection and adjustment. The show's pacing allows for a gradual exploration of these themes, and I appreciate how it resists the temptation to resolve conflicts too neatly, because the absence of clear answers mirrors the complexities of the world the characters inhabit. One of the elements that stands out to me is the show's attention to the emotional impact of each case on the detectives, and how their reactions reveal as much about their personalities as the crimes themselves, and that focus on internal experience adds depth to the narrative. I find myself thinking about a scene in which the younger detective expresses frustration with the limitations of the system, and the older detective responds not with a lecture but with a story from his own past, and that exchange becomes a turning point in their relationship because it demonstrates how wisdom can be shared without diminishing the other person's perspective. The show's commitment to portraying its characters as fully realized individuals extends to its depiction of the city's residents, and each interaction between the detectives and the people they encounter feels like an opportunity to explore different facets of human behavior, from resilience to desperation to quiet hope. The visual style of the series contributes to this sense of immersion, and the use of location shooting gives the city a tangible presence that enhances the emotional stakes of each scene, and I find myself appreciating how the camera captures both the beauty and the tension of the environment. The phrase "a good cop" but continues to echo as the narrative progresses, and it becomes clear that the show is less interested in defining what makes a good cop than in exploring the challenges of striving for goodness in a world that resists simple definitions. I think about how the series uses recurring motifs to reinforce its themes, and how the detectives' shared experiences create a sense of continuity that binds the episodes together, even as each case introduces new conflicts and questions. The dynamic between the two central characters serves as the emotional core of the show, and their interactions reveal the ways in which mentorship can be both supportive and challenging, and I find it compelling how the older detective's guidance often comes in the form of questions rather than answers, encouraging the younger detective to develop his own understanding of justice. As I reflect on the series as a whole, I am struck by its ability to balance suspense with introspection, and how it invites viewers to consider not just the outcomes of the investigations, but the processes by which the characters arrive at their decisions, and that emphasis on process adds a layer of authenticity that distinguishes the show from more conventional dramas. The title A Good Cop but encapsulates the show's central tension, and it serves as a reminder that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing negotiation between ideals and realities, and that the characters' willingness to confront their own limitations is what ultimately defines them. In revisiting the series, I find myself appreciating the subtlety with which it explores the emotional lives of its characters, and how it uses the framework of a police drama to examine broader questions about responsibility, empathy, and the possibility of growth, and that depth of exploration ensures that the show remains engaging even after multiple viewings. The partnership at the heart of the narrative becomes a symbol of the potential for understanding across differences, and the series suggests that the most meaningful progress occurs not through dramatic gestures, but through the accumulation of small moments of insight and connection. And in that sense, the phrase "a good cop" but becomes less a judgment than an acknowledgement of the complexities inherent in any attempt to do good in a complicated world.